Shravan Kumar was a young man, a teenage boy. His parents, Shantanu and Gyatwanti, were very elderly. They made it clear to their son, however, that they wanted him to take them to the 40 places of pilgrimage. It is a typical Hindu belief that a pilgrimage to the various shrines and royal holy places undertaken in old age purifies the soul before death. At the time, transport was scarce and costly, and Shravan Kumar could not afford it. So he decided to put each parent in a basket with a long bamboo pole and put it over his shoulders and carry them to these palaces, these places of shrine places. He decided to put them in a basket which Shravan would shoulder while on their pilgrimage. Meanwhile, there was a prince, Dashrahartha, was looking for an animal to kill. He was near a lake. When he heard rustling at the edge of the lake across the water, he shot his arrow. When he crossed the lake to collect his kill, he found that his arrow had fatally struck a teenage boy who was bleeding. The boy, Shravan Kumar, told the prince that he had come to the lake to collect water for his sick and aged parents, who were both blind and who he had been carrying on a sling. With his dying breath, Shravan, the prince, requested that the prince take the water to his parents and tell them what had happened. Shravan succumbed to his wounds. When the prince took water to the boy's parents and told them of his tragic mistake, they were unable to bear the shock. Despite acknowledging that it was an accident, they cursed the prince that he too would experience patrashuka, or grief, due to the loss of a son. The death of the young man was achingly tragic. But I wondered when I first came across this story, why was the prince hunting? Hinduism encourages a vegetarian diet due to scriptures that promote ahimsa, or the avoidance of causing harm to living beings. However, I'm also aware that not all Hindus are vegetarian. This is an epic, old story, and its authenticity is argued, true or not. But for whatever reason, it's tragic that the boy was killed, leaving no one to care for his parents and causing his life to be shortened. Shravan was committed to carrying his parents. He was honorable. He was eager to do as his parents had wished. Here's the goodness present in the story. He was eager to honor his parents and their desires. So what about the response from the parents? When the prince came to them and told them the accident, what was their reaction? To place a curse on him, that he too would experience the pain one day of losing a child. I wonder, what would have happened if the parents had not been blind? Would there have been retribution? More violence, perhaps? Which person do you identify with in this story? Which person can you most easily relate? Aren't we all of them? We are the prince in the woods, hunting for pleasure, perhaps at times. He was a prince of higher caste. It's likely all of his basic needs are met. They were met. Without a desire to cause ill will, he caused harm. Without a desire to cause ill will, we on occasion cause harm. But aren't we supposed to enjoy life? And yet, we too are careless on occasions. We are the teenage boy, perhaps trying to do the right thing. I have no doubt that many of us are overloaded with burdens, carrying expectations of others, our parents, our adult children, because we care, and yet we suffer from the weight of our endeavors. Have you ever thought, if I don't help, no one will? And yet, when I try to help, I'm the one who suffers. You and I are the helpless parents. At times, we lash out, cursing the world for the pain we have experienced. If we could, would we physically create retribution? Would we pay back, inflict pain on those who intentionally cause us or those we care about harm? So the story I shared with you is a common story for children in India to learn. You know, it's kind of like a folk tale. How many of you in our country know about old Mother Hubbard? The lady who lived in a shoe had so many children she didn't know what to do, so she spanked them and fed them and put them to bed. I thought, there's violence in a story that we grew up with. How about 3 blind mice? There's a story. Farmer's wife cut off their heads with a carving knife. Oh my gosh. So as I listen to this and I think, children from India grew up with this story? So there was Gandhi, if you hear me from the other world, forgive me. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. He heard this when he was growing up. Gandhi, the revered teacher from India, was born in 1869 in October into an upper class, a Brahmin caste family. He was married at 13 to a girl who was 14. It was through an arranged marriage, which was the custom. The two had a first child that survived only a few days. Then they had 4 more, all sons, throughout their marriage. As Gandhi grew and after he completed high school, he was sent abroad where he received a law degree from the University College of London. He was encouraged by his mother to adopt English ways. While in London and still adhering to a vegetarian diet, he created a group whereby other vegetarians could meet. It was there he met folks who were part of the if you know this word, would you say? Theosophical Society. I hate it. I read this through, I practice, and still I stumble. Anyway, this is not unknown to Unitarian Universalists if you look in our history. This movement was founded in 1875. It was an unsectarian body of seekers after truth who endeavored to promote brotherhood at the time and to strive to serve humanity. Scratch the surface of Unitarian Universalists, and you will find some of our ancestors in this movement. So this group focused on understanding the universal brotherhood, which led to a study of Buddhism and Hinduism, to study the literature. It is said that Gandhi never had an interest in religion. However, this was when he became intrigued and delved into religious thought. Gandhi returned to India where he learned his mother had died. Even though he was called to the bar in 1891, he had trouble in his law practice. Apparently, he struggled with cross-questioning witnesses. 2 years later, he went to South Africa, also part at the time of the British Empire, where he worked for an Indian firm. It was in South Africa where Gandhi learned firsthand the destructive elements of racism. You see, in London, he was somewhat of an anomaly. He was considered more a darker-skinned Englishman than a light-skinned man from India. Not so in South Africa. In South Africa, racial segregation began in the colonial times under the Dutch Empire and continued when the British took over in 1795. Gandhi spent 21 years in South Africa. He was subject to many acts of violence, including when he was kicked off of a train for not giving up his seat to white folk. There are recollections and written records stating that Gandhi made it clear that he and his Indian brothers and sisters were not of the same lower rank as the indigenous Africans. We can't argue that he, a man considered by many as great and honorable, was racially biased. So this is the thing about honorable men and women. They are fallible human beings. We tend to put them on a high pedestal and then happily knock them down when we find out something about their character that is unappealing. Take Martin Luther King Jr., a great man who was influenced by Gandhi's writing, by the way. And yet, in recent years, we understand that infidelity was a challenge for Dr. King. Do we disregard his voice? No. Thomas Jefferson, a Unitarian, was highly respected. His views on religious freedom are embraced by many, and yet he was a slave owner. Do we disregard his voice? Now, hear me out here, because I'm going somewhere with this. There are two poignant things about shattering the voices of people who endeavor to bring honorable thought and actions throughout history. First, we don't have to excuse imperfection, but we can view it for what it is, often contextually located. And still, we can and should honor, at least recognize a person's goodness. With awareness, we can ferret out that which is helpful. Gandhi said, goodness must be joined with knowledge. Mere goodness is not of much use, as I have found in life. One must cultivate the fine, discriminating quality which goes with spiritual courage and character. As long as we say that behavior is unforgivable, I refuse to respect that person's voice, you and I are off the hook. We don't have to try to emulate good behavior. Hampton Sides writes in a book called Remembering Martin Luther King as a Man, we don't have to try to emulate good behavior by calling our heroes superhuman. We also let ourselves off the hook. Why do the hard work of bettering the world if that is only something for saints to do? Isn't it cowardly to dismiss the efforts of people who revealed their goodness by pointing out their flaws, thereby ignoring our own responsibility to make the world a better place? Gandhi, who acquired the Mahatma title, meaning revered or venerable one, in 1914, said, "My imperfections and failures are as much a blessing from God as my successes and my talents, and I lay them both at God's feet." In the final years of Gandhi's life, he returned to India, where he became a preeminent leader in the movement for Indian independence from British rule. His voice at this period in his life was clear, most poignant, perhaps most powerful. Thomas Merton wrote, in rediscovering India and his own right mind, one of the skilled eightfold path in Buddhism, in rediscovering India in his own right mind or skilled mind, Gandhi was not excavating from libraries the obscure disputed questions of Vedantic scholasticism. He was, on the contrary, identifying himself fully with the Indian people. That is to say, not with the westernized upper classes, nor with the Brahmin caste. Remember, like classes over here, there's lower class, upper class. We're aware of that. In India, there's the lower and the Brahmin class, which is the upper. So by this time, he had learned the difference, and he advocated for the starving masses, and in particular with the outcast untouchables. That was from Gandhi, a book called Gandhi on Nonviolence. So Gandhi's work toward nonviolent resistance was intentional, just as Martin Luther King Jr.'s was years later. It takes work and focused intention to maintain nonviolent resistance. Gandhi was assassinated, as most of us know, at point-blank range in 1948. Of course, you can look up this information, so I need not continue with a litany of his life. But there are a couple of Gandhi's teaching that touch me the most. He said violence was not part of human nature. He felt if we were most authentic to our true nature and to the divine, to God, we would not be inclined to violence, but to ahimsa, a commitment to doing no harm. Ahimsa, said Thomas Merton, is not a policy for the seizure of power. It is a way of transforming our relationships so as to bring about peaceful transfer of power, effected freely and without compulsion by all concerned, because all have come to recognize it as a right. So the second aspect of Gandhi's work that has a profound impact on me, especially in these days of concern over individuals in the Middle East and Ukraine, and even our concerns about January when a new person takes the presidential office, is the idea of this commitment. This transformation to a life of peace and well-being has to become a practice, personally chosen to all of our life every day. It must be something that is intentionally nurtured inside each individual. The only true way to a life of nonviolence is not to consider that it is someone else's job but my job to cultivate more peace. Nine-year-old Anna was walking home from school. She was on a sidewalk. And as she turned a corner, a taller, older boy, around 13 or 14, jumped in front of her, out of the bushes, and he was waving a knife at her. Just as the older boy lifted his arm, another boy, Garrett, turned the corner. He was older than Anna, but not older than the boy who had the knife. And he stood between Anna and the boy with the knife. He held up his hands and said, "Hey, I don't think this is what you really want to do." The boy with the knife waited a moment, then ran away. Anna cried. Garrett walked her home. Now, as the parent who listened to Garrett tell his story, how would you feel? Would you be filled with anger for the boy who had the knife? Garrett said he was only concerned about Anna, but the parent was ready to find the boy with the knife and punish him for retribution of his threat of harm. So this true story occurred in Bloomington, Indiana, ages ago. It ended well, but in other neighborhoods, it doesn't, does it? I have asked myself, what if my husband, my father, my partner, my child were killed for no reason, including for the color of his skin or for sexual identity? Could I remain nonviolent? It's one thing to cognitively understand that nonviolence is a worthy goal. It's another thing to live it. Hannah Arendt said, "The practice of violence, like all action, changes the world, but probably the most change is to a more violent world." So I was in line I'm stepping off script real quick here. So I was in line at a store this morning picking up something, and the clerk was having trouble with the cash register. And the person behind me, who was right here breathing down my neck, kept going, And I thought, I'd like to turn around and say, "Can you just lower it a little bit?" But I was afraid of violence. Instead, I stood there, smiled at the cash register, and thought, kindness, kindness, kindness. I know it's one thing to be nonviolent, and it's another thing to fear for your own life. In Blessing the World by Dr. Rebecca Parker, she wrote this: "Effective resistance to violence begins with our personal efforts to integrate our experiences and our knowledge of violence and its effect on our lives. We may need to find a new heart or discover a new identity." So Parker went on to tell this story about an evening when she couldn't sleep. She was filled with trouble. She was confused. She was upset about her life. So she got up and decided to walk to the lake to end her troubles. Now, this is violence as well, what we do to ourselves. She said, "I was determined to walk into the lake's cold darkness and find there the consolation that I could not find myself." As she walked, she noticed a line of shadows, a barricade to where she was headed. She said as she edged closer, she discovered it was a line of human beings hunched over strange-looking, spindly equipment. Telescopes. It was the Seattle Astronomy Club. There they were with their homemade Heathkit telescopes and their top-of-the-line sharper image telescopes, dressed in their Gore-Tex backcountry gear and tennis shoes. A whole club of amateur scientists up and alert in the middle of the night because the sky was clear and the planet All the planets were near. In order for her to complete her task, she would have to get past one of the enthusiasts in tennis shoes who had assumed I had arrived to look at the stars. Here, look, the young man said. He began to explain to her what she was seeing through his telescope. Parker said, I know there is grace because my life was saved by the Seattle Astronomy Club. For health and well-being, I invite you to stay true to a life of nonviolence, to others and to yourself, a commitment to gentleness. Be gentle with yourself and with others. And when you're most fraught with confusion and anxiety, look to the stars for clearer vision and to your breath for calm resolve. Blessed be, and amen.